Good evening, everyone.
Of abundance.
Thank you very much for coming together to study words of wisdom from Torah and to share words of wisdom that we have to offer from within our own wells of knowledge and experience. So we are going to be concluding this evening our reading of the book of Exodus, very special moment in our cycle of reading. So I'd like to, at this point, invite everyone to go ahead and unmute yourself, and those who wish can join together in the recitation of the blessing, expressing gratitude for the opportunity of sharing Torah with one another. So if you'd like to, feel free to go ahead, unmute, and together we can recite our blessing. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishkanu mitzvotav Torah. Thank you, God, for this opportunity of sharing Torah with one another. Once again, if everyone can go ahead and go on mute, we will at this point read through our Torah portion, which is actually a double portion this week, Vayakhel-Pekudei. And if you have a copy of the Torah with you, you can find our starting point at chapter 35 of the book of Exodus, beginning with verse 1. I'll share in the reading of a few verses, and then I'll invite others who'd like to do so to have an opportunity to read some verses as well. And then I'll share a little bit of a focused study with us all. And then I'll invite everyone to share with us your thoughts and reflections about our Torah portion. Once again, we are in Exodus chapter 35, verse 1. Allow me to share the opening verses with you. Moses then convoked the whole Israelite community and said to them, "These are the things that Adonai has commanded you to do. On 6 days, work may be done, but on the seventh day, you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to Adonai. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day." Dave, would you like to unmute and read beginning at verse 4 for some verses?
Okay. Moses said further to the whole community of Israelites, "This is what the Lord had commanded. Take from among you gifts to the Lord. Everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring them. Gifts for the Lord, gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen and goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for anointing oil and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and the breastpiece. And let all among you who are skilled come and make all that the Lord has commanded: the tabernacle, its tent, its covering, its clasps and its planks, its bars, its posts and its sockets, the ark and its poles, the cover and the curtain for the screen, the table and its poles and all its utensils, and the bread of display, the lampstand for lighting, its furnishing and its lamps, and the oil for lighting, the altar of incense and its poles, the anointing oil, and the aromatic incense, and the entrance screen for the entrance of the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering, its copper grating, its poles, and all its furnishings, the laver and its stands, the hangings of the enclosure, its posts and its sockets, and the screen for the gate of the court, the pegs for the tabernacle, the pegs for the enclosure and their cords, the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary, the sacred vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his sons for priestly service.
Thank you, Dave. And let me ask Jim and Peggy, would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 20?
Thank you, Rabbi. So the whole community of the Israelites left Moses' presence, and everyone who excelled in ability and everyone whose spirit moved him came, bringing to Adonai his offering for the work of the tent of meeting and for all its service and for the sacral vestments, men and women, all whose hearts moved them, all who would make an elevation offering of gold to Adonai, came bringing brooches, earrings, rings, and pendants, gold objects of all kinds, and everyone who had in his possession blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, and dolphin skins brought them. Everyone who would make gifts of silver or copper brought them as gifts for Adonai, and everyone who had in his possession acacia wood for any work of the service brought that. And all the skilled women spun with their own hands and brought what they had spun in blue, purple, and crimson yarns and in fine linen. And all the women who excelled in that skill spun the goat's hair. And the chieftains brought lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece, and spices and oil for lighting, for the anointing oil and for the aromatic incense. Thus the Israelites, all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything for the work that Adonai through Moses had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering to Adonai.
And Moses said to the Israelites, see, Adonai has singled out by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. He has endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft, and has inspired him to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting, and to carve wood, to work in every kind of designer's craft, and to give directions. He and Oholiab, son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan, have been endowed with the skill to do any work of the carver, the designer, the embroidery, in blue, purple, crimson yarns, and in fine linen. And the weaver as workers in all crafts and as makers of designs. Let then Bezalel and Oholiab and all the skilled persons whom Adonai has endowed with skill and ability to perform expertly all the tasks connected with the service of the sanctuary carry out all Adonai has commanded.
Thank you so much, Jim. Let me invite Richard Kramer. Would you like to pick up there at verse 2 of chapter 2?
Yes, thank you. Moses called Bezalel and Oholiab and every skilled person whom the Lord had endowed with skill, everyone who excelled in ability to undertake the task and carry it out. They took over from Moses all the gifts that the Israelites had brought to carry out the task connected with the service of the sanctuary. But when these continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning, all the artisans who were engaged in the task of the sanctuary came, each from the task upon which he was engaged, and said to Moses, "The people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that the Lord has commanded to be done." Moses thereupon had this proclamation made throughout the camp: "Let no man or woman make further effort towards gifts for the sanctuary." So the people stopped bringing their efforts, had been more than enough for all the tasks to be done.
Thank you, Richard. Let me invite Steve. Breton, would you like to pick up there?
Yes, thank you. Then all the skilled among those engaged in the work made the tabernacle of 10 strips of cloth, which they made of fine twisted linen, blue, purple, and crimson yards. Into these they worked a design of cherubim. The length of each cloth was 28 cubits, and the width of each cloth was 4 cubits. All cloths having the same measurements. They joined 5 of the cloths to one another, and they joined the other 5 cloths to one another. They made loops of blue wool on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set, and did the same on the edge of the outermost cloth of the other set. They made 50 loops on the one cloth, and they made 50 loops on the edge of the end cloth of the other set, the loops being opposite one another. And they made 50 gold clasps and coupled the units to one another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle became one whole. They made the cloths of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. They made the cloths 11 in number. The length of each cloth was 30 cubits, and the width of each cloth was 4 cubits, the 11 cloths having the same measurements. They joined 5 of the cloths by themselves and the other 6 cloths by themselves. They made 50 loops on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set, and they made 50 loops on the edge of the end cloth of the other set. They made 50 copper clasps to couple the tent together so that it might become one whole. And they made a covering of tanned ram skins for the tent and a covering of dolphin skins above.
Thank you so much, Steve. Todd, do you want to do any reading this evening?
Not this evening, Rabbi.
Okay, Todd, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Let me invite Martine then, if you'd like to start reading at verse 20 of chapter 36.
Thank you, Rabbi. They made the planks for the tabernacle of acacia wood upright. The length of each plank was 10 cubits, the width of each plank a cubit and a half. Each plank had 2 tenons parallel to each other. They did the same with all the planks of the tabernacle. Of the planks of the tabernacle, they made 20 planks for the south side, making 40 silver sockets under the 20 planks. 2 sockets under one plank for its 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under each following plank for its 2 tenons. And for the other side wall of the tabernacle, the north side, 20 planks. With their 40 silver sockets, 2 sockets under one plank, and 2 sockets under each following plank. And for the rear of the tabernacle, to the west, they made 6 planks. And they made 2 planks for the corner of the tabernacle at the rear. They matched at the bottom, but terminated as one at the top into one ring. They did so with both of them at the 2 corners. Thus, there were 8 planks with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 under each plank.
Thank you so much, Martine. And let me invite Tom and Jackie. Would you like to do some reading beginning at verse 31?
There we go.
Thank you, Rabbi. They made bars of acacia wood, 5 for the planks of the one side wall of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the planks of the other side wall of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the planks of the wall of the tabernacle at the rear to the west. They made the center bar to run halfway up the planks from end to end. They overlaid the planks with gold and made their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and they overlaid the bars with gold. They made the curtain of blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen, working into it a design of cherubim. They made for it 4 posts of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold, with their hooks of gold. And they cast for them 4 silver sockets. They made the screen for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen done in embroidery, and 5 posts for it with their hooks. They overlaid their tops and their bands with gold, but the 5 sockets were of copper.
Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit and a half high. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and out. He made a gold molding for it round about. He cast 4 gold rings for its 4 feet, 2 rings on one of its side walls and 2 rings on the other. He made poles of acacia wood overlaid with gold and inserted the poles into the rings on the side of the walls of the ark for carrying the ark. He made a cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and a cubit and a half wide. He made 2 cherubim of gold. He made them of hammered work at 2 ends of the cover, 1 cherubim at one end and 1 cherub at the other end. He made the cherubim 1 piece of the cover at the 2 ends. The cherubim had their wings spread out above, shielding the cover with their wings. They faced each other, and the faces of the cherubim turned toward the cover.
Thank you so much, both of you. Sherry, would you like to do some reading beginning at verse 10?
He made the table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and 1 cubit and a half high. He overlaid it with pure gold and made a gold molding around it. He made a rim of a hand beneath around it and made a gold molding for its rim around about. He cast 4 gold rings for it and attached the rings to the 4 corners at its 4 legs. The rings were next to the rim as holders for the poles to carry the table. He made the poles of acacia wood for carrying the table and overlaid them with gold. The utensils that were to be upon the table, its bowls, ladles, jugs, and jars with which to offer libations, he made of pure gold.
Thank you so much, Ray. And let me invite David and Susan. Would you like to pick up there at verse 17?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. He made the lampstand of pure gold. He made the lampstand, its base and its shaft of hammered work. Its cups, calyxes, and petals were of one piece with it. 6 branches issued from its sides, 3 branches from one side of the lampstand and 3 branches from the other side of the lampstand. There were 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals on one branch, and there were 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals on the next branch. So for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. On the lampstand itself, there were 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals. A calyx of one piece with it under a pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the second pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the last pair of branches. So for all 6 branches issuing from it. Their calyxes and their stems were of one piece with it, the whole of it a single hammered piece of pure gold. He made it 7 lamps, its tongs, and its fire pans of pure gold. He made it and all its furnishings out of a talent of pure gold.
So where am I?
25.
He made the incense altar of acacia wood, a cubit long and a cubit wide, square, and 2 cubits high. Its horns were of one piece with it. He overlaid it with pure gold, its top, its sides round about, and its horns, and he made a gold molding for it round about. He made 2 gold rings for it under its molding on the 2 walls on opposite sides as holders for the poles which to carry it. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with pure gold. He prepared the sacred anointing oil and the pure aromatic incense expertly blended. He made the first the altar for the burnt offering of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide, square, and 3 cubits high. He made horns for it on the 4 corners, the horns being of one piece with it. He overlaid it with copper. He made all the utensils of the altar, the pails, the scrapers, the basins, the flesh hooks, and the fire pans. He made all these utensils of copper. He made for the altar a grating of meshwood in copper, extending below, under its ledge, to its middle. He cast 4 rings at the 4 corners of the copper grating as holders for the poles. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with copper. And he inserted the poles into the rings on the side walls of the altar to carry it by them. He made it hollow of boards.
Thank you both so much. Leah, it's lovely to have you join us. We are in chapter 38, verse 8. Mark Thompson, would you like to read a little bit beginning there?
Thank you, Rabbi. Verse 38? No, sorry. What did you say?
Chapter 38, verse 8.
Verse 8, okay. He made the laver of copper and its stand of copper from the mirrors of the woman who had performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He made the enclosure. On the south side, 100 cubits of hangings of fine twisted linen for the enclosure, with their 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper, the hooks and bands of the posts being silver. On the north side, 100 cubits, with their 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper, the hooks and bands of the posts being silver. On the west side, 50 cubits of hangings, with their 10 posts and their 10 sockets, the hooks and bands of the posts being silver. And on the front side, to the east, 50 cubits, 15 cubits of hangings on the one flank, with their 3 posts and their 3 sockets, and 15 cubits of hanging on the other flank on each side of the gate of the enclosure with their 3 posts and their 3 sockets. All the hangings around the enclosure were of fine twisted linen. The sockets for the posts were of copper, the hooks and bands of the posts were of silver, the overlay of their tops was of silver, all the posts of the enclosure were banded with silver. The screen of the gate of the enclosure done in embroidery was of blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. It was 20 cubits long. Its height or width was 5 cubits, like that of the hangings of the enclosure. The posts were 4. Their 4 sockets were of copper, their hooks of silver, and the overlay of their tops was of silver, as were also their bands. All the pegs of the tabernacle and of the enclosure round about were of copper.
Thank you, Mark. And we now enter into the second half of our short portion, Pekudei. Mark Levinstein, would you like to read there, beginning at verse 21?
It's my privilege. These are the records of the tabernacle of the pact, which were drawn up at Moses' bidding, the work of the Levites under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. Now Bezalel, son of Ur, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, had made all that the Lord had commanded Moses. At his side was Eliab, son of Ahishmach, of the tribe of Dan, carver and designer and embroiderer in blue, purple, and crimson yarns and in fine linen. All the gold that was used for the work, all the work of the sanctuary, the elevation offering of gold came to 29 talents and 730 shekels by the sanctuary weight. The silver of those of the community who were recorded came to 100 talents and 1,775 shekels by the sanctuary weight. A half shekel a head, half a shekel by the sanctuary weight, for each one who was entered in the records of the age of 20 years, up 603,550 men. The 100 talents of silver were for castings of the sockets of the sanctuary and the sockets for the curtain. 100 sockets to the 100 talent, the talent a socket. And of the 1,775 shekels, he made hooks for the posts, overlay for their tops, and bands around them. The copper from the elevation offering came to 70 talents, 2,400 shekels. Of it he made the sockets for the entrance of the tent of meeting, copper altar and its copper grating, and all the utensils of the altar, the sockets of the enclosure round about, and the sockets of the gate of the enclosure, and all the pegs of the tabernacle, and all the pegs of the enclosure round about.
Thank you, Mark. We're now beginning chapter 39. Leah, would you like to do any reading tonight?
I do, but I'm still trying to find it, so I'm not with you yet.
Okay, very good. Dave, Lev, would you like to read at the beginning of chapter 39?
Sure. Of the blue, purple, and crimson yarns, they also made the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary. They made Aaron's sacred vestments as the Lord had commanded Moses. The ephod was made of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. They hammered out sheets of gold and cut threads to be worked into designs among the blue, the purple, and the crimson yarns and the fine linen. They made for it attaching shoulder pieces. They were attached to at its 2 ends. The decorated band that was upon it was made like it, of one piece with it, of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen, as the Lord had commanded Moses. They bordered the lazuli stones with frames of gold, engraved with seal engravings of the names of the sons of Israel. They were set on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as the stones of remembrance for the Israelites, as the Lord had commanded Moses.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. We're now at verse 8. The breastpiece was made in the style of the ephod, of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. It was square. They made the breastpiece double, a span in length and a span in width, double. They set in it 4 rows of stones. The first row was a row of cornelian, chrysolite, and emerald. The second row, a turquoise, a sapphire, and an amethyst. The third row, a jasmine, an agate, and a crystal. And the fourth row, a beryl, a lapis lazuli, and a jasper. They were encircled in their mounting with frames of gold. The stones corresponded in number to the names of the sons of Israel, 12, corresponding to their names, engraved like seals with each with its name for the 12 tribes. And now we're at verse 15 of chapter 39. Jim and Peggy, would you like to pick up there?
On the breastpiece, they made braided chains of corded work in pure gold. They made 2 frames of gold and 2 rings of gold, and fastened the 2 rings at the 2 ends of the breastpiece, attaching the 2 golden cords to the 2 rings at the ends of the breastpiece. They then fastened the 2 ends of the cords to the 2 frames, attaching them to the shoulder pieces of the ephod at the front. They made 2 rings of gold and attached them to the 2 ends of the breastpiece at its inner edge, which faced the ephod. They made 2 other rings of gold and fastened them on the front of the ephod, low on the 2 shoulder pieces, close to its seam above the decorated band. The breastpiece was held in place by a cord of blue from its rings to the rings of the ephod, so that the breastpiece rested on the decorated band and did not come loose from the ephod, as Adonai had commanded Moses.
The robe for the ephod was made of woven work of pure glue. The opening of the robe in the middle of it was like the opening of a coat of mail, with a binding around the opening so that it would not tear. On the hem of the robe, they made pomegranates of blue, purple, and crimson yarns twisted. They also made bells of pure gold and attached the bells between the pomegranates, all around the item of the robe, between the pomegranates, a bell and a pomegranate, a bell and a pomegranate, all around the hem of the robe for officiating in, as Adonai had commanded Moses. They made the tunics of fine linen of woven work for Aaron and his sons, and the headdress of fine linen, and the decorated turbans of fine linen, and the linen breeches of fine twisted linen, and sashes of fine twisted linen, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, done in embroidery as the Lord had commanded Moses. They made the frontlet for the holy diadem of pure gold and incised upon it the seal inscription, "Holy to Adonai." They attached to it a cord of blue to fix it upon the headdress above, as Adonai had commanded Moses.
Thank you both so much. Let me invite Tom and Jackie. Would you like to continue there at verse 32?
Thus was completed all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. The Israelites did so, just as the Eternal had commanded Moses, so they did. Then they brought the tabernacle to Moses with the tent and all the furnishings, its clasps, its planks, its bars, its posts, and its sockets, the covering of tanned ram skins, the covering of dolphin skins, and the curtain for the screen, the ark of the pact and its poles and the cover, the table and all its utensils, the bread of the display, the pure lampstand with lamps due in order, and all the fittings, and the oil for lighting, the altar of gold, the oil for anointing, the aromatic incense, and the screen for the entrance to the tent, the copper altar with its copper grating, its poles, and all its utensils, and the laver and its stand, the hangings for the enclosure, its posts and sockets, the screen for the gate of the enclosure, its cords and its pegs, all the furnishing for the service of the tabernacle, the tent of the meeting, the service and vestments for officiating in the sanctuary, the sacral vestments for Aaron the priest, and the vestments for his sons for priestly service. Just as the Eternal had commanded Moses, so the Israelites had done all the work. And when Moses saw that they had performed all the tasks the Eternal had commanded, so they had done, Moses blessed them.
And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month, you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Place there the ark of the pact, and screen off the ark with the curtain. Bring in the table and lay out its due setting. Bring in the lampstand and light its lamps, and place the gold altar of incense before the ark of the pact. Then put up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. You shall place the altar of burnt offering before the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Place the laver between the tent of meeting and the altar, and put water in it. Set up the enclosure round about, and put in place the screen for the gate of the enclosure. You shall take the anointing oil and anoint the tabernacle and all that is in it, to consecrate it and all its furnishings, so that it shall be holy. Then anoint the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils, to consecrate the altar, so that the altar shall be most holy. And anoint the laver and its stand, to consecrate it.
Thank you both so much. Let me invite Jay. Would you like to read a little bit, beginning at verse 12?
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall bring Aaron and his sons forward to the entrance of the tent of meeting and wash them with the water. Put the sacred vestments on Aaron and anoint him and consecrate him, that he may serve me as priest. Then bring his sons forward, put tunics on them, and anoint them as you have anointed their father, that they may serve me as priests. This, their anointing, shall serve them for everlasting priesthood throughout the ages. This Moses did, just as Adonai had commanded him, so he did. In the first month of the second year, on the first of the month, the tabernacle was set up. Moses set up the tabernacle, placing its sockets, setting up its planks, inserting its bars, and erecting its posts. He spread the tent over the tabernacle, placing the covering of the tent on top of it, just as Adonai had commanded Moses. He took the pact and placed it in the ark. He fixed the poles to the ark, placed the cover on top of the ark, and brought the ark inside the tabernacle. Then he put up the curtain for screening and screened off the ark of the pact, just as Adonai had commanded Moses.
Thank you so much, Jay. Let me invite Martine. Would you like to read beginning at verse 22?
Thank you, Rabbi. He placed the table in the tent of meeting outside the curtain. What?
I thought you skipped 20, but I could be wrong.
You said 22,
Okay.
right?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thanks. He placed the table in the tent of meeting outside the curtain on the north side of the tabernacle. Upon it, he laid out the setting of bread before Adonai, as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the lampstand in the tent of meeting opposite the table on the south side of the tabernacle. And he lit the lamps before Adonai, as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the altar of gold in the tent of meeting before the curtain. On it, he burned aromatic incense, as Adonai had commanded Moses. Then he put up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. At the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting, he placed the altar of burnt offering. On it, he offered up the burnt offering and the meal offering, as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the laver between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it for washing. From it, Moses and Aaron and his sons would wash their hands and feet. They washed when they entered the tent of meeting and when they approached the altar, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And he set up the enclosure around the tabernacle and the altar and put up the screen for the gate of the enclosure.
Thank you so much, Martine. Let me invite Richard Kramer. Would you like to conclude?
When Moses had finished the work, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. When the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their various journeys. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until such time as it did lift. For over the tabernacle is a cloud of the Lord rested by day, and fire would appear in it by night, in the view of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's our Torah portion for the week. It's also the conclusion of the book of Exodus. We have a special expression of celebration and honor that we say when we finish a book of Torah. And let me pronounce it for you, and then together we can say it. We say, Hazak, Hazak, Venit Hazek. If you'd like to unmute, and we can all say it together.
Hazak.
Thank you so much. You can remute. I'd like to share with you a little bit of focus study, and then I'll invite everyone to offer their own perspectives and thoughts and comments about this week's Torah portion. What we've just said, Hazak, Hazak, Venit Hazek, which can be translated as be strong, and we shall be strong, is actually a wonderful segue into the little bit of focus that I wanted to provide for this week's Torah portion, because it has the sense of this imperative that's spoken to each one of us, and then the result of each one of us strengthening ourselves creates a collective strength. So that's a little bit of what I wanted to explore with us for the next few minutes. I'd like to look at our study sheet, and for those who don't have a copy of the study sheet and would like one, you can email me and let me know that you'd like to receive a copy each week. So on this week's study sheet, I have an oil painting by a wonderful Israeli artist who lives in Jerusalem, Orit Martin, and she has created this beautiful work called Blessing, and it is of an individual walking along a path and Hebrew letters showering down upon him. And her own commentary on what she's painted is this: Kabbalah refers to the Hebrew letters as tubes of abundance, through which spiritual light and life descends into the world, since the world was created through letters in the speech of the Creator. We're going to explore a little bit about the power of Hebrew letters and of language, not only as a source and a vehicle and vessel for divine power, but also what they mean about us as vessels and vehicles of the same. I've entitled this week's study session, Uniqueness and Union, because I think it's significant that we are concluding this book of Torah, which initially conveys the story of this liberation, this story of freedom. And sometimes when we in the modern age think of freedom, we tend to think about individual freedom. And this story is very different. This is a story about liberation as merely a precursor to the true purpose of this mission, which is to create a sense of holy community. And that sense of holy community is expressed perhaps most beautifully in this project that we've just been reading about called the Mishkan. The Mishkan, which is this collective communal enterprise that everyone contributed to. And that is the vehicle through which these people who were once slaves, who are now free, kind of reconfigure themselves in a different kind of community, no longer slaves, but now free people who are dedicating themselves to constructing something quite unique and that creates among them a sense of covenant, belonging, and purpose. But I've been thinking lately about this tension between personal freedom and then collective existence. So we're going to explore a little bit about that in this week's study session. And we're going to focus on one of the intriguing characters in this week's story, that of Bezalel. Bezalel is the one who's assigned to be the chief architect, if you will, of the Mishkan. And so here's our verse from this week's Torah portion. I have endowed him, Bezalel, with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge. I left the Hebrew there in the study sheet because I think the Hebrew takes us into a very interesting place. With a divine spirit of skill, chokhmah, ability, tevunah, and knowledge, da'at. These three terms, chokhmah, and then the word tevunah, comes from the Hebrew verb bin, which means to discern. It's a very interesting word. We also get from that the adverb, bein, between. So this verb to discern gives us that sense of creating distinction. And so you can see how that sense of creating distinction gives us that adverb between, that there's a space between things. And so another word that comes from the same root, binah. Binah means understanding or discernment. So we have, in a sense, we have here these three terms, chokhmah, binah, and da'at. And in terms of Kabbalah, these three terms, chokhmah, binah, and da'at, are in a sense the three top expressions or emanations from the divine source. And they represent this initial outpouring from the source of everything into this dimension. And chokhmah, if you will, chokhmah, which is sometimes translated as wisdom, is the first of these to arrive out of this emanation from the divine. It is this burst of creative, undifferentiated insight. It is the power of creativity, of imagination just exploding. The next phase, that of binah, then takes that initial creative explosion and then begins to formulate it. It begins to take it from a mere undifferentiated abstraction into a clear concept, if you will. And then da'at, the third step in this process, da'at is the ability to implement, to actualize what has up until that point been an abstract concept. So you might say that the process here is a creative process, a developmental process, and then a conclusive process. Bezalel, according to our very text here that we've just read, has all of those capacities. He has the capacity of imagination to take this sudden rush of being exposed to something quite amazing and then be able to formulate it into something quite distinct, and then has the skill to be able to not just have it as an abstraction, but then to be able to actualize it. He has all of these. So our commentaries are quite fascinated with this character Bezalel. So here we have from the Babylonian Talmud, from Masechet Brachot, we have this little bit of midrash. Bezalel knew how to join the letters with which heaven and earth were created. And it is written regarding creation, God founded the earth by wisdom, chokhmah. God established the heavens with understanding, tevunah. Through God's knowledge, da'at, the depths were cleaved, from Proverbs. So here again, this midrash in the Talmud is picking up this verse from Proverbs with the same words, Chokhmah, Tevunah, Da'at, and say, these are how God, with which God created all of existence. And the primary vehicle for doing that were letters. And Bezalel, according to this midrash, knew how to manipulate the Hebrew letters in order to bring things into existence. Bezalel, according to the Hebrews, was skilled in the articulation and manipulation and combining of letters in order to bring material things into existence. Not only does this bit of commentary understand Bezalel to be skilled in the way of letters and language, but he also has a skill with another element, if you will. And we see that in this midrash in number 3 from Shemot Rabbah. And that reads, see, God has called by name Bezalel. It is written in the prophet Isaiah, behold, I have created the smith. This refers to Bezalel that blows the fire of coals. When Israel sinned with fire, as it says, and I cast it into the fire of coals, and there came out this calf. Bezalel came and healed the wound. This midrash is now saying that Bezalel was skilled in the use of fire, and it is now contrasting how he used fire with how fire was used earlier in the creation of the golden calf. And it's quite interesting to think about Bezalel and the creators of the golden calf used similar elements and materials. They used gold, they used fire, and one produced something that was quite divisive and destructive, and the other, Bezalel, produced something that brought the community together, was harmonious, and was healing. This notion about fire is quite fascinating. We first encounter perhaps the power of fire in a positive sense in the very beginning of the book of Exodus, when Moses encounters the burning bush. There is a bush on fire, but it is not being consumed. Somehow it is possible for fire to be a force that doesn't destroy. And yet, when we get to the story of the golden calf, we see that fire can be something that can be quite destructive. It creates something that is divisive, that creates violence, it creates disunity that destroys a community. What's the difference? I was thinking about it just today, that Moses was so patient. He was so reflective. He was able to experience fire as something that was not destructive, not consuming, but was insightful. By contrast, the creation of the golden calf came out of this moment of fear and anxiety, impetuosity, a rush to do something. Our leader is gone. Quick, make a god for us. We're going to see pretty soon another example of fire becoming destructive because of an impetuosity. And that will be the story of Nadav and Abihu. People who rushed into something without any kind of preparation, reflection, or forethought about what they're about to engage in, and were consumed by some kind of fire. Here we encounter Bezalel, who seems to know how to not only fuse the letters of creation, but also to use fire in the way fire was meant to be used, to create harmony and beauty and devotion. And it's interesting to think about how he is someone who has this, if you will, this feeling of da'at, this capacity to integrate these different aspects of imagination and conception, and then to be able to execute upon it. But what's key here is that Bezalel has this capacity to mediate between separateness and union. I was a welder. I understand something about the power of fire to destroy and cut away, and it also has the power to fuse, to meld things together. And so here is Bezalel, who is skilled in the capacity to take separate elements and to be able to join them together in union. And we have in the Jerusalem Talmud, there is this notion that without a sense of separateness, there can be no union. Without a sense of the other, there can be no union. And this seems to be Bezalel's chief skill, his capacity to negotiate, to mediate between separate elements and to meld them together in some kind of new union. If you turn over the sheet, I'll share with you number 4, which is from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. And he said, all things were created through combinations of the 22 Hebrew letters. This notion about not just that the letters themselves are significant, but what brings things into existence is the capacity and the skill and the knowledge of how to combine those letters. Each letter may be a bit of fire in and of itself. And you can either bring those things into combination, I suppose, that combust and causes damage, or you can bring them together in ways that meld things together, that create new unions and brings about new existence. Let me share with you how this all works in terms of what it means to write a Torah scroll with all these letters and to combine them into words. So I've summarized for you in number 5 some of the rules for writing a Torah. Not a fragment of a single letter may be omitted or distorted, nor may its individual character be compromised with any other letter. Every word must be spelled correctly. One extra, transposed, or missing letter invalidates the whole scroll. These are some of the basic rules about writing a Torah scroll. They're also saying something about what it means to be a human being and in relationship with others. Each person has a unique purpose. No one may impinge on another's particular purpose in life. And in combination, great wisdom is revealed. We are Torah, as well as what we are reading from. The capacity to recognize each other's uniqueness and to know and to have the skill to bring our uniquenesses together in holy purpose creates great wonder. So with that, let me invite everyone to share something that provoked you, that interested you, that you thought about during this week's Torah portion. Go ahead, Susan.
You're unmuted.
So I just wanted to thank you because as you called on different people and everybody read, for me this evening, their voices were weaving the whole Torah portion, all the things that were done. And it was really beautiful.
Thank you, Susan. That's a beautiful comment. Thank you so much. And let me invite Jay, go ahead and unmute and share with us.
I correct me, and if you look at the end of chapter 39, the very end of it, and it says, and when Moses saw that they had performed all the tasks as the Lord had commanded, so they had done, Moses blessed them. I don't recall anywhere else in everything we've read where Moses actually himself blesses. Now, perhaps I'm mistaken. Isn't this a rarity for him to do the blessing?
Let's wait and see what happens as we begin to read Sefer Vayikra. Okay, let's see what happens in there. But thank you. It's a good observation. Thank you. And let me invite Paul. Did you have something? Yes, go ahead. Please, Paul.
Yeah, the comments you made about the word da'at explains something like a 70-year-old riddle to me, because as a kid at the yeshiva, I joined a group called Shomer Hadati. And when my rabbis found out that I belonged to the Shomer Hadati, they were unhappy with me. And I didn't understand until just a few minutes ago why that. I know they're happy with these other things, but why that? And the word Hadati probably meant that we were at that time, we didn't have Israel yet. And so we were doing all kinds of things, maybe not right, but getting things shipped out. And I never knew what was inside the boxes. And but the point of the matter is that we were implementing something. We were, and you pointed that out, where that actually there's people at the yeshiva who had a lot of wisdom and they had a lot of knowledge, but when it came to the implementation portion, they were objecting.
So is that part of the word da'at, Hadaki?
Margot, I logged you in. Oh, maybe that's right. That's a question.
I'm not sure, but what you're talking about, Paul, as I understand it, is the fact that you were raising money to bring into existence something that perhaps human beings were not supposed to bring into existence. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, it was illegal to ship anything, and there was a boxer called Barney Ross who was at that time shipping a lot of things because they were thinking that, I think, well, to be blunt, there was just not oranges. I think there was something in the boxes like weapons, and so we never really knew what it was. But the rabbis were against that idea that somebody would actually do something.
Yeah.
And so the word da'at and dati, it seemed to me that it comes from the same 3 letters. All the Hebrew is depending on 3 letters. And dati sure contains those 3 letters.
And Paul, what you're describing, you were living through the novel The Chosen.
Oh,
right, between one faction that wanted to bring about a Zionist state and the other faction that said that's God's job. So
that was the workman's, the Arbeit. It's called the Arbeiterring. It was the workman's circle.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Paul. And others who'd like to share some insight or comment or provocation or questions about this week's Torah portion. Okay, Richard. Sorry.
Well, da'at is one of the sferot, but it's got parentheses about it. It's the throat. It's where wisdom comes to binah, to get formed, and then it comes through the throat in a different dimension to be turned into language. But it's not one of the sferot. It's in a different dimension. It's trying to bring it to earth. And so I see the dot box as an attempt to, we're supposed to be a nation. We need to have a place, and we need to have arms, and we need to have defend our borders, and that's that. And it brings it to that level to where we can have a community to try and understand our individuality, but the individuality is a matter of putting the different skills that each person has together to weave a cloth of community.
Beautiful. That sense of weaving is beautiful. Thank you.
Yes. Rabbi?
Yes.
Hey, Todd, I actually, this was unbelievable. I really took from it that the inherent beauty of the individual that, but must be combined with other individuals to form a productive society. And even on a level of a business that there's the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we see, that there's an individual job description for a person, but those jobs must be combined into an organizational chart, which forms a unified group of people that can achieve what the individual cannot, that it really does take a village. That's beautiful, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. That's so beautiful to take it to that realm as well, and how important team building is, especially these days, as opposed to your cutthroat individual capacity to beat out someone else. Let me see, and go ahead, Richard.
I just want to add that when Paul said that there are these two people that wanted to have a state, and people that didn't want to have a state. My grandfather was a member of the Bund in Russia and a member of the Zionists, and he quit both to come to America. And that ambiguity, or that tension of, are we to make something real and get involved in these horrible, brutal wars, or are we to retreat and just be in the tranquility of Eden? Well, we're always caught in that. We're always caught in that. And Da'at is an attempt, as I see it, to bring that down and to vocalize that ambiguity and then wrestle with it.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Richard. And Mark Thompson, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and unmute. Go ahead and unmute and share with us.
Unmute, Mark.
Mark Thompson, would you like to unmute and share with us? Okay.
Speaking to.
All right. And anyone else like to share?
Say hello.
No. I don't want that, yeah.
Just say you're sorry you're late.
And Tom? Go ahead and unmute, Tom.
Sorry about that.
Moses chose Bezalel, and his grandfather, was there when the golden calf was being destroyed, and they, this fire building and fire destroying. Is there some connection there that, there is, but is there any more to that story, that his grandfather was that why he was selected? Because he was part of that lineage that upheld the law?
I don't know. I'm also remembering, wasn't her one who held up Moses' arms during part of the battle?
Your question.
Yeah. So you're asking why her? Okay. Mark Thompson.
I'm back.
Yes.
I had this to me was a personal challenge, because in Vayakhel, the first, I guess the second verse, where it says, there was a challenge because God's talking about observing the Sabbath day, and that this takes precedence over all work. And now for the next two chapters, there is a great description of detail on how the Mishkan is to be constructed, whether or not these were gifts from the people, or whether it sounds to me like it was a lot of work. And what occurred to me is that there is so much detail and description about the construction of the Mishkan, and there's nothing about how we observe the Shabbat. The only thing that I know about in terms of observing the Shabbat is what you shouldn't do. But boy, if we could figure out the Chokhmah, the Tivuna, and the Da'at, that we might be able to learn in order to observe Shabbat perfectly or better. That's a personal challenge for me, because Shabbat takes precedence over everything that Bezalel certainly has done, or that what we're reading about. And to me, it's a real challenge, and it caused me to think about that in more detail.
Well, that's so fascinating that you say that, Mark, because of course, that's what the rabbis of the Talmud, when they start to wonder, what is it we're not supposed to do on Shabbat? What is Shabbat all about? They go back to the construction of the Mishkan as being some guideposts as to something about the construction of the Mishkan informs their understanding of what constitutes Shabbat and what constitutes activities that are not supposed to be performed on Shabbat. So it's interesting that you bring that Shabbat and the Mishkan together. Thank you so much for doing that. Others would like to share something?
I wanted to add to that notion that Mark brought up, because that was, I had trouble getting past that line. Everybody, you got to go to death if you don't obey it. But wait a minute, who's going to do this deathing? What are the details about that? How is that done? Not just why, but how. And I recall then that thinking some time ago that observing the Shabbos, observing the Sabbath, is about doing nothing but observing the Sabbath, observing God resting. So I suppose in words, I would say, well, then you don't do anything. You don't do any work. You don't light any fires. Well, it gives you a chance simply to watch the burning bush, simply to be glorified by watching God rest and understanding he's taking care of everything. And if you don't do that, your life is gone.
Here's what you're all making me think about, which is the chasm that exists between our understanding of what it means to be an individual in the 21st century and what it meant 2,000 years ago. Now, our notion of what it is to be an individual is a very modern concept, I think. And when the notion, and I think about this in terms of what you're both saying about the notion of death, that not observing Shabbat results in death. I think about death as being one being separated from a community. Because in ancient times, a person did not have any existence, identity, or purpose apart from their affiliation with some kind of group, whether it's family, clan, kin, tribe, nation, whatever it is. Today, we say, hey, I'm who I am. I can do whatever I want. I can live wherever I want. I can associate with whomever I want. Back then, the notion of an individual existing apart from their affiliation with some larger group was just non-existent. And so that, I think, that's what I think of when I think of death, that you are now removed from, you're excised from that community, and therefore you virtually have no existence. You have no relevance. You have no potency in this world.
You're cut off from your kin.
You're cut off from your kin. And so that must mean then that to observe Shabbat in this understanding is not about what I'm going to do today. It has something to do with the construction of community. It has something to do with deepening that to further weaving that fabric that ties us all together. That's to me is what's at the very heart of Shabbat, and not just with one another, but Shabbat is also about weaving, if you will, that fabric that connects us with the source of everything. Okay.
So this portion then starts out with, if you work on Shabbos, you're going to die, cut off from your kid. But here's what you do in the non-Sabbath. You all get together and do this very ornate piece of working together to build a tabernacle.
So let me conclude with this.
Yes.
Which is, sorry. Thank you. You've taken me to a certain place, which is thank you, which is that the trajectory of the book of Exodus starts off in slavery. We then go through this freedom, but where it culminates is in the construction of this Mishkan, which is a communal construction. It's not just someone built it or some team built it. It was a collective effort that everyone participated in. So that's the trajectory. We're being freed in order to have a collective, in order to have a communal enterprise and project and experience and identity. That's where we conclude with Sefer Shemot, the book of names, the book of Exodus, the book of communion and community. So with that, I want to say each one of you is a beautiful, unique individual, and together we are weaving constantly this beautiful sacred community. Thank you so much. I'm so
Thank
grateful.
you.
God bless you all. Look forward to our next gathering. Be well.
Rabbi, I'm sorry I came in late. I was involved in I'm sorry I came in late. I was involved in something else.
So happy to see you, Margaret. Okay.
Better late than never.
I think we're going to have a glass of champagne to
you
celebrate
in
the
Leviticus.
successful conclusion
Okay.
of Exodus. And here we go into Leviticus.
Here we go.
Oh my
I'm heading for my labor.
Thank you.
Could we ask everybody?
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'm going to go for my labor.
Okay.